Hello everyone, this is Alan here, and in this session we will be discussing some of the useful tips for the paper Advanced Audit and Assurance, and these tips are suggested by the ACCA's examining team itself. So basically, when it comes to the paper Advanced Audit and Assurance, we know that it's one of the most important paper in our whole ACCA journey. Mainly because most majority of candidates are planning to work in the field of assurance after completing their ACCA qualification. So the knowledge in the paper Advanced Audit Assurance is very vital. But at the same time, the theoretical knowledge about the paper and the way in which we need to approach the exam is a bit different. So we should be practicing maximum questions as possible. In addition to that, we should be considering some important tips, or we should be considering some important points while giving answers in the paper Advanced Audit and Assurance. So let's consider each one of these points. So the first thing that the examiner has suggested is that you have to read the questions properly. Well, we know that the requirement will be specifically based on the scenario, and the scenario will be based on the requirement. So you should be focusing both on the requirement and on the scenario. Mainly while reading the requirement, you should be having a proper understanding on what answer is being demanded by the examiner. Say for example, in the area of reporting, we have got matters to be considered and further actions that need to be taken by the auditor, and matters to be considered and further procedure that need to be taken by the auditor. So the matters to be considered and further action is entirely different from that of matters to be considered and further procedure. When it comes to the audit procedure, it's all about the way in which we will be expressing. For example, when it comes to a question like the matters to be considered before accepting an engagement and the matters to be considered before agreeing the terms of an engagement, both are entirely different. Because when it comes to the matters to be considered before accepting an engagement, we will be considering the factors such as auditor's professional competence, the risk that the auditor need to face while performing the engagement, reputation of the client. Then, is there any possibility of having something affecting the company's management integrity? Is there any possibility of having money laundering and related things? And when it comes to matters to be considered before agreeing the terms of an engagement, you should be considering the terms of an engagement letter. So both of these requirements are entirely different. Same as that, when the examiner is asking for matters to be considered and further action and matters to be considered and further procedure, the answer will be entirely different, because in case of further procedure, you'll be considering the audit procedures that need to be performed by the auditor. And in case of further action, you will be mentioning about the matters that you need to communicate with the management, those charged with governance, obtaining written representation, and so on. So the requirement will be entirely different from each of the questions, and timely basis it will be updated by the examiner. So make sure that you are properly reading the requirement and you should be giving answers specific to the requirement. And again, in addition to considering the requirement, as we mentioned earlier, the requirement will be based on the scenario. So it is very important to properly go through the scenario before writing the answer. Whenever you write an answer, the answer should be specific to the scenario. And if you give rote learned knowledge or general points as the answer, you will not be getting possible mark that you expect. So the examiner will be willing to provide mark only for the answers that are purely based on the scenario that the examiner have provided. In addition to which, well, we know that 20 marks of a paper AAA is based on professional marks. And to get the professional mark, you should be giving answers specific to the scenario. You should be considering each of the points that have been provided by the examiner, and you should be giving answers based on your own judgment. So whenever you give the answer, make sure that it is based on scenario. Then, many students struggle to figure out the risk from the scenario. Many students struggle to find out the materiality of the errors. Many students finds it really struggling to do the questions relating to reporting, and all of these are mainly because of the lack of knowledge in the financial reporting standards. So importance of knowledge in the paper SBR is very important to write answers properly in the paper AAA. Because well, we know that when it comes to the paper AAA, here we are considering the role of an auditor. And it's the role of an auditor to identify the mistakes in the financial statements. So in order to identify the mistakes, or if you want to give answers from the exam perspective, you should be having proper knowledge on what is the actual treatment required there. So only if you have a proper picture on the required treatment, then only you will be able to identify whatever things that went wrong in the scenario. So at least in the last moment, you should make sure that you have gone through all the important standards. There are no specific standards on which you need to give priority, but you have to give priority for all the standards. For the earlier versions of AAA exams, there were some standards which were frequently tested. Now the things have changed completely. The examiner might ask you questions from any area of the SBR. So you should be properly thorough with the standards. In addition to which, you should also be considering revising the area of consolidation as well. Because when it comes to the questions based on audit risk and all, you will either get a question based on group based scenario, which is a consolidated financials of an entity, or it can also be based on individual FS. So standalone FS or consolidated FS might be given in your scenario. So you should be familiar with both the cases, then only you will be able to give proper answers for the examiner. Then again, the next and most important thing, there are several areas in the AAA syllabus which might be creating a confusion for the students, especially the areas of fraud, money laundering. Then there are also responsibilities of the auditor in relation to non-compliance with non-compliance with law and regulations. So all these areas, theoretical knowledge should be covered, and you should make sure that you are able to interpret and differentiate each of these areas. Well, we know that fraud is an intentional act that is performed by a client company. On the other hand, money laundering is also relating to fraud, but it's entirely different reporting that we need to follow in case of money laundering. Because in case of money laundering, we should be reporting the money laundering related transaction to the money laundering reporting officer or the MLRO. Then MLRO need to create a report and they need to submit it to the Financial Intelligence Unit or the National Crime Agency. On the other hand, fraud reporting is a bit different from that of the money laundering related reporting. But almost fraud reporting and non-compliance with law and regulations reporting is similar. So only if you have a proper theoretical knowledge in this area, you will be able to perform well. So you should revise all the theoretical areas in relation to the auditor's responsibilities. Then the next one is the right to rules for the right exam. So well, we know that for the paper AAA, there are multiple versions available. You can either opt for the UK version or you can opt for the international version. So when you opt for an international version, you should make sure that whenever you give answer, you are giving answers on the basis of the international standards. Maybe in case of ethics, maybe in case of auditing related standards, or should be used the international standards itself. And when it comes to the UK version, you should be using specific standards that will be applicable to the UK based auditors or the answers based on UK legislation. So the answers which you give is relating to the same requirement of the examiner. So in the international version, you should never use UK related standards. You should only be using the international standards. And again, important of revising the reporting part is very important. Because when it comes to the reporting area, anyway you can expect one question from the area of reporting. 125 marks question will be based on reporting. So you should be revising your knowledge in the area of reporting. You should be considering the factors under which you should consider a misstatement as material. Same as that, it's very important to give the justification for considering a mistake as pervasive rather than just merely mentioning that the mistake is material and pervasive. You should clearly justify the reasons on the basis of which you consider a misstatement as material or pervasive, for which it's important to have knowledge about the reporting area of our syllabus. So you should properly revise the reporting part. Then the audit procedures. So the audit procedures can be asked as part of 25 mark question, as well as this can also be asked as part of our 50 mark questions as well. So when you get a question on the audit procedures, we have already done detailed videos on audit procedures. You can find the same videos in our Tutor Club channel, ACCA Tutor Club channel. And in addition to which, whenever you mention the answers in relation to audit procedures, you should make sure that there's a procedure, plus the document or informations which you can obtain from the client should be specified, plus the purpose for which you are performing that procedure should also be clearly specified. So there should be a procedure, the name of document or information should be provided, plus the purpose for which you should perform this procedure should also be clearly mentioned. So if you are writing a procedure without giving the purpose, you will not get the marks as you expect. So you should be properly specifying each three of these elements to get proper marks in the area of audit procedures. Then, whenever the examiner asks you to explain a risk, rather than just stating that it creates a risk, you should clearly be mentioning about how this will result in a risk. Or when you are writing an answer based on reporting, when you're writing an answer based on critical appraisal, whatever things that went wrong should be clearly explained. Same as that, the most important thing that you need to consider is that you should stick on to time. You should not take more time than what is usually allowed for a particular question. Say for example, for the 50-mark question, you should not take more than 1.5 hours. So only if you are properly sticking onto the time, then only you can make sure that you will be able to complete the whole exam and you will be able to give answers for the examiner's requirements. So if you give answers for all the examiner's requirement as possible, then the possibility of clearing the exam is also high. So you should make sure that you are sticking on to the time. Make sure that you don't take even a single second at excess other than the allowed time. So make sure that you are giving answers for all the requirements as possible rather than trying to complete a single question. Then, most importantly, it's very important to revise, practice and review your answer. Try to practice maximum number of questions as possible. Do refer to all the important technical article. We have already uploaded other videos on technical article in our channel. Do refer to that. Do practice maximum questions. Use the ACCA's exam platform. You may attend the pre-mocks in order to make sure that you are familiar with all patterns of questions that will be asked for the paper AAA. So make sure that you are revising each of these areas, practicing maximum number of questions, and you are also properly managing your time. All the very best everyone. Do best for your exam and do clear the exam in the upcoming window itself. All the very best.